Hello again, and thank you for joining us again here at Autistic Radio. The 555 show, Harry's Facebook Conversations, is sponsored by coldpack.co.uk. If you're a practitioner needing the best cryotherapy product for your practice, or a home user, you can use the website coldpack.co.uk. And every single penny comes here to Autistic Association to support the activities, including Autistic Radio. Thanks for your support. Hi Harry, what are we starting with today?
Hello all, this is Harry's Facebook for Sunday the 9th of August 2026, and this is where we share the post that's on the Autistic Radio Facebook page. And as always, we start with a poem that's been shared. And the poem is from the autistic poet, a tutor and teacher, life on the autistic spectrum, lived out loud, an autistic adult moving through the world with my family by my side. Poems, quieter thoughts, raw truths, and gentle information about autism, identity, and the journey to and after diagnosis. Based in the UK. And it shared a Sunday morning poem. Happy Sunday morning. Last week I started writing a poem in the graveyard of the Holy Trinity Church in Stratford upon Avon. I came to see the resting place of William Shakespeare and was hoping for some inspiration. And the poem is called A Kit Kat and King Lear. Sat eating a Kit Kat, chunky of course, sipping Highland Spring, mulling my thoughts as rowing boats and paddleboards drift by. I've been here 10 minutes, and well, so does the time pass by. Not just minutes, but years, even decades, and like the current in front, it can never be stopped. What's your thoughts?
Well, I've not had a chunky Kit Kat for a long time.
What this poem reminds me of is something I used to do, is being somewhere and being inspired just to write a poem. Not about the place itself, but just even writing a poem, being where I was. And this is what this appears to be. And it shared a nice picture of the area as well in the background.
So I've never been there. Is that the River Avon? Um, I wonder if any of us have been there.
Yeah, I have. Used to cycle there. Um, I, I hate this. I hate the picture, and I don't see the point of the poem. You know, I the picture is AI generated, and it looks like an advertisement um, with the two pieces, the two commercial items of the drinking water and the chocolate bar. I don't get really the sense of the sentiment. It reminds me of one of those posters we used to see in the 70s that were supposed to be uh, instructive, a little bit like homilies. Everything about it makes me uncomfortable.
You mean those like love is posters, sort of inspirational. Yeah. Um, and yet this is an eternal theme, if I can discern a theme in here, going back to Heraclitus, of like you can dip yourself in the river, but it's never the same river, you know. I kind of like, maybe he's hinting at that, but as the rowing boats and paddle boards drift by, I've been here 10 minutes, and well, so does the time pass by. Not just minutes, but years, even decades, and like the current in front, it can never be stopped. These inspirational Kit Kats, chunky of course, and that Highland spring mulling my thoughts. Mulling? A Kit Kat and King Lear. I used to love it when you would get like a song title and the title had nothing to do with the song. This is only partially like that because the Kit Kat is part of the poem, but is King Lear? Maybe I'm missing something because I'm no a big Shakespeare expert.
Gia mentioned in the text, is it Vogan poetry? Even though I understand what Jules is getting at in a way, it does seem like an advertisement in a way as well in terms of the Highland Spring and the Kit Kat. But we'll also identify um, it's like someone sharing what their favourite thing is to do. Like they like to have a Kit Kat and they like to have bottled water. And it's just something, it seems like an automatic poem. It's like a thought flow. And sometimes the thought flow isn't totally inspirational, it's just something that comes out and something you just want to get it put down. A lot of these poems you don't generally share. Sometimes you feel comfortable enough to share, but sometimes you go, oh, that's a lot of nonsense. But it makes you feel good for doing it because you're letting something out. So it looks like that, but it looks kind of personal in that way. It's like it's sharing someone being somewhere and having their favourite drink, their favourite chocolate or whatever. But what I liked about the poem itself was it was talking briefly, because the poem is quite short, about passage of time. It's something I think about a lot when I stop somewhere. Or sometimes I even just stop from my life, which can get quite busy. I just sit and just think about how many years I've lived in my house, how many years ago that a relative has passed, how many years since I left school, how many years since the last milestone I've created for myself, like being involved in a project. I do with Autistic Radio, thinking how many years I've been doing it, how many, how many Sundays have I been doing just what I'm doing just now. Although I haven't thought about that in that kind of depth, but just sitting thinking about the passage of time. Sometimes it can be, oh, is that much time passed? And sometimes it's like, it's a bit of a needle. It's like, oh, it's like you felt you've wasted time. It just depends on the mood. But that's what I'm taking a bit from the poem as well.
And the river keeps on rolling. Now I'm sitting here wondering, does he nibble the edges of his Kit Kat to get pure chocolate like I used to do back in the days when I ate chocolate? Once I was extremely lucky and got a Kit Kat that was all chocolate. There was no wafer inside it.
Yeah, I think I had that myself. I think it was the four finger one that had it with that, and it seemed like it was a mistake. But talk about chocolate. I can recall, maybe not so much now, even I still eat chocolate. I remember eating chocolate as an absolute comfort because I've been stressed that day or something's annoying me. It's like when smokers, have a cigarette or an alcoholic having a drink, maybe. It's just like needing something to soothe or something to make a bit better, a buzz even. Even like, I don't like using that word. I kind of used that word in front of my mother once and she panicked, and I understand why. And that was me relating to I wanted something with caffeine in it. So yeah, just flowing thoughts coming to my head that I'm sharing.
I mean, what I've said is harsh, and we really do enjoy the poetry of the autistic poet. And having somebody share something and then have somebody else criticize it is a really bad feeling. Um, I don't want to retract my thoughts. I just don't want to harm anybody. Um, it's the first time I've seen one of these poems that we share over many, many months that I've just thought, nah. Um, but it contains, truths. It contains the idea that contemplation, nostalgia, simple words to say that time doesn't stop still, the association with the river, uh, the it evokes the idea that somebody is just eating a simple pleasure like a piece of chocolate, drinking some water, their favourite, the way they do it. So in some ways, it is very successful because you know, we already kind of know where that person was, how they were doing it. So in lots of ways, if it was just the words on the page, it would be successful. And my reaction is to the presentation, to the way it's been advertised on social media. So the pressure of social media to put a picture and create something with AI to go with it, in my mind, has detracted from the simple black and white on the page, the simple thought that the poet puts out there. So maybe maybe my reaction is about the presentation rather than the content.
I'm wondering if this is just a taster. Ha, see what I did there? Because in the text there's a wee bit Harry didn't read, I think, which says that after 35 minutes, something formed in my notebook. I've edited it and will drop it on here later. Warning, it's quite a long one. Now, given that this poem was only a few lines, I think we've got something bigger mulling.
Yeah, I think we'll welcome the long one. I think the long one is the thing that's going to give us meat. It's the long one that we need to discuss. The taster is I don't know, a modern social media way of dealing with things. Uh, Try to hook you in. Well, maybe I just feel as I'm grown up enough to see black and white on the page, and I want to get into the words and get into the mind of the autistic poet that we've enjoyed so much before.
Weren't we often told that if you have something like a sweetie or a Kit Kat before your main meal, it will put you off it?
Yes, agree, Raymond. The next post is from Neurodivergent Lou, who's a blogger, finding a place in a neurotypical world. And Neurodivergent Lou generally shares presentations. And what they shared in this one is 12 autistic traits I assumed I didn't experience as I interpret them literally. I'm going to do it in a batch of 3, to keep it simple and for discussion purposes. Don't think throwing 12 at people would be very fair. So, 12 autistic traits I assumed I didn't experience as I interpret them literally. Number 1. Black and white thinking. Why I assumed I didn't experience this trait. I assumed that this meant when you imagine seeing in your head, you see it in black and white rather than colour. But how this trait might show up. Thinking, if I can't do it perfectly, then there's no point in starting. If something goes wrong in a social situation, then it's all my fault. If I am struggling, then it means that I can't do it. Number 2, slow processing speed. How I took this literally. My brain felt like it was processing so much all the time, especially sensory input, so I assumed I was processing quickly, but actually I was processing certain things more slowly, for example instructions or communication. How this trait showed up. Difficulty following a conversation. May say what even though we have heard what has been said, I just haven't processed it. I may be unable to process an emotion until days or weeks later. Number 3, toe walking. How I took this literally. I assumed that this meant only walking on your toes. How this trait showed up. Walking on just the sides of your feet. Walking on just your heels. And avoiding putting foot fully on the floor. What's people's thoughts of what's been shared so far? Do people identify with them?
Yeah, that latter one about the feet. When I was a kid, I used to bounce, and I'm thinking back, it may have been that I was prioritising or putting emphasis on the front of my feet. Anybody who's worn out their shoes regularly will know this. If you have a look at them, you can see that you maybe have an incline. This might be common to most people. But to have a quite dramatic incline shows that you're maybe walking in a certain way. There was a time when I had to be educated to walk without bouncing. Basically because, for my own sake, I was getting undue attention, so I didn't want it, But anyway, that's a diversion. But I'm curious about this thing, like having confidence on your feet. Even today, I'll sometimes find myself really walking, like really placing my foot on the ground and feeling it and going, hey, I've just been taken for granted walking, And I'm not overthinking this. It's just recently I've noticed that I'm not so confident on my feet. I'm not so sure. It could be knees, age. But sometimes when I place certain feet down and I have a more comforting shoe on, I'm more relaxed about it, and it's like a fuller kind of engagement. So that's just the feet, but there was other ones before, which are communication things, which I think came up in our earlier conversation, about how we process things and how it can affect us. Yeah, I'll leave it open for others here.
I must sound really grumpy today because I rail against these kind of things. it makes me feel as though we're allowing other people to define us, and I'm really uncomfortable with that. I know that as a child I might have understood things in a bit more black and white way, and then I used my intelligence to see the subtlety and the difference in communication. It it's uncomfortable to me, to because there feels as though there's a buy-in to some kind of inferiority in us in this, and that's really uncomfortable for me. When it says black and white thinking at the beginning, I don't think it took me very long to realise that black and white were two opposites, and that the grey areas in between. So I understood the concept, and if it does have interesting things in it though, when it says that some autistic people might think that if they can't do it perfectly, then there is no point in starting. And I do recognise that in autistic people. So there's a balance I'm trying to bring in here. I feel as though the second one, if something goes wrong in a social situation, autistic people assuming it's their fault, isn't actually about autism. It's about the experience of being autistic in society, because that is a learnt thing. It's a learnt thing that other people make you feel it's your fault if you make a social faux pas. It's not autistic, it's what we become in society. And the same with the third one. If I'm struggling, then it means I can't do it. That's not autism. That's about being autistic in a society that has made you feel that the people that struggle can't do it. And that works for non-autistic people too. You know, people who don't have the benefit of very high intelligence can be discriminated against, and then they give up. That's for neurotypical people and autistic people. And then we talk about slow processing speed. I don't see that there is much evidence to say that autistic people have slow processing speed. My experience is that we are processing an awful lot, and because we're all, processing an awful lot and looking at things in different ways, the result looks like slow processing, because we are dealing with a lot more, we're thinking a lot more around it. And that could mean that we get left behind in a conversation because our brains have gone on to other things. Whereas maybe the general population, all they're interested in is following the conversation, following the expected norms that happen, the patterns, almost like ChatGPT. What is the next thing to say? What is the most likely thing to say? And then off they go and repeat it. Whereas I feel as though autistic people are actually much more likely to be deeply thinking about what has been said and finding nuance and finding difference. That may look as though we're slow. I just think we're doing more. And then saying what to gain time is a technique, you know. I would say what to get time to work out how I want to respond to something. It's not that I haven't understood it, and it's not that I need to process it. It's I don't want to just give the straight next thing out. You know, I'm not an automatic robot machine. I'm somebody who thinks, and I think autistic people are more likely to think, and not just give the next thing. Emotions may be something that is built into us, but even that, it feels as though it's societal expectations and experience that have put us into that situation much more than how we were born.
Moving on to number 4. Number 4, interoception. How I took this literally. I thought I did feelings in my body. I must not have difficulties with body awareness. How this trait showed up. Not realising I'm hungry until I feel unwell. Forgetting to drink water. Not noticing if I'm too hot or cold. And struggling to identify if I'm in pain or unwell. Number 5, struggling to identify emotions. Why I assumed I didn't experience this trait. I could tell if I felt good or bad, but I found it difficult to name the specific emotion, like anger, upset, frustration, joy, or recognise how it showed up in my body. How this trait showed up. Being able to say I feel good, bad, etc., but struggling to name a specific emotion. Realising how you felt only after the situation has passed. And tendency to describe emotional experience in a factual way. For example, that didn't go as expected, rather than saying I felt disappointed. And number 6, taking things literally. Why I assumed I didn't experience this trait. Assuming I didn't take phrases literally because I knew when people says it's raining cats and dogs, they didn't mean cats and dogs were falling out the sky. How this trait showed up. Yet when people say grab a chair, I thought they meant pick up a chair rather than sit in the chair. When people said the dishwasher needs doing, I thought they were making a general statement of fact. When someone says I will see you later, I thought they meant they would actually see me later that day, rather than a way to say goodbye. What's your thoughts?
I think it reiterates what Jules was saying about learned behaviour in a social setting.
I think the thing is that neurodivergent Lou is correct. I'm not trying to take the truth away from what they're saying. I'm using it as I'm picking little parts of it to make my own points, without hopefully taking away the truth in what they're saying.
I find where it says about being unwell is being part of my parents were, if you were on your deathbed, you were still alive and you could get up and go for work and you just worked through it. And I've had like when my back flares up, I try and keep going as best as I can. And at the moment, my left thumb is swollen for some reason, and I just keep going. I don't really think to go to the doctor unless it's, and I've had to rush myself to the doctor with severe chest infections and been put on oxygen because my breathing was so shallow. So I just tend to keep on keeping on.
Yeah, I get that. I think that's a general societal thing, though, about if you're feeling unwell. And I think it's very unfortunate. It's a survival thing, but also because of people are generally unemployment. It's like if you're unwell, you've got to be really unwell to have as an excuse not to work or not to do anything, and anything other than that threshold is a sort of term of you're being lazy or you're being at it, which I find very unfortunate. But I know neurodivergent Lou's saying, I've kind of read different experiences. I don't think my general experience shares with it, but I've read different experiences where there's a lot of autistic people don't really know if a certain feeling is they're actually unwell or it's just an unpleasant feeling. There's been people that are saying that they're basically being forced to see a doctor, not because of pride, which can be the case for many people, or just try to survive and get on with things. But it's sometimes not recognising the signs and the emotions because in many autistic people it's displayed in such a way that it's not understood. Not because there's anything wrong with that, it's just a different way of things are meant to be understood, so you just don't recognise that. So I've been aware of such experiences being shared before.
I
For
was
me,
off sick. I was off sick. Bit of a chest infection from where I worked, and the boss rang me up. And when I answered the phone, they said, "Oh, you're at home then?" And I said, "Well, I'm off sick. Where else would I be?" I just found that very strange.
haha, they were checking up on you, I'm guessing. Um, I really like what neurodivergent Lou has put in number 4, interoception. When they say that the trait shows up in not realizing they're hungry until that they feel unwell, I've been doing that all my life, and it's taken up until this point to start to get it. Forgetting to drink water, absolutely, and I notice it in other autistic people until they get some kind of technique to make sure they do it. Not noticing if I'm too hot or cold. It happened the other day when I was still wearing a jumper and a jacket in 32 degrees heat, and I was kind of enjoying the overheat, but then realizing that no, this is silly. You need to start take some clothes off a lot later than somebody else, and the struggling to identify various things in the body. I think that's very, very part of our actual nature rather than what's put upon us.
Number 7. Moving on to number 7. Struggles with transitions. Why I assumed I didn't experience this trait. I assumed that because I didn't always struggle with big life transitions, that I didn't realise that this could apply to the everyday transitions. How this trait showed up. Getting stuck, unable to get out the car after arriving home. Struggling with getting out of bed and going to bed. Feeling like when I'm experiencing emotion, it will last forever. Number 8. Difficulty with social cues and rules. Why I assumed I didn't experience this trait. I assumed that because I knew the social rule and would follow it all the time with no exceptions. I was really good at understanding social cues and rules. How this trait showed up. In reality, I struggle to understand that social rules and cues are nuanced and change with situation. So, when at school, if we are told you are not allowed to speak without being called on, even in an emergency, like alerting to a fire, I assume that rule applied. Number 9. Special interests. Why I assumed I didn't experience this trait. I assumed that in order to have a special interest, I had to know every single thing about that interest, otherwise, it wasn't special enough. How this trait showed up. Becoming so absorbed in interest that I forget to eat and drink. A sense of body and mind lighting up when thinking about a special interest. And collecting screenshots related to my interests. What's people's thoughts?
I don't have a problem getting out of the car. It's I call it the loop. I check the doors are locked. I walk around the car and then I'll do it again and again and again. Um, and this is especially when I'm stressed. Also, checking the back doors locked at night and then standing there just looking, doors locked, bolts down, doors locked, bolts down. And then I go off and check I've turned the electric off. And I go back out, door locked, bolt down. And then sometimes I'll go to bed and then after a few minutes I get up and come downstairs. I just get locked in that loop. I find that uncomfortable.
Someone needs to mute. I'm kind of the reverse of that hypervigilance of is that switched off and things, because to me it felt like a demand or imposition. When I was a child, even brushing my teeth I would avoid. I thought, God, have I got to do that? Even washing myself sometimes. It wasn't that my body was irritated by it, I just couldn't be bothered. Because I just wanted to go to sleep. And I thought, I've got to do this other thing first. And so to avoid the anxiety of the loop, I just wouldn't bother. And so that led to problems, obviously. Bad teeth. I was reflecting on transitions in relation to what the conversation we had the hour before. Because for me it was happening with moving from being involved in the lighting up of special interests, being happy in your joy, and then having to be in a situation with other people and their demands. I thought it would talk about that, but it's obviously talking about something else, more basic things. Struggling with getting out of bed and going to bed. I don't know. I'm not getting a lot of resonance here with this.
Well, the struggling of going to bed and into bed, what I relate to that, whether there's transition or not. I don't like going to bed feeling down. And I've noticed I've done this a few times, even if I'm going somewhere early the next day. It's like I don't want to feel bad. If I feel unwell at stuff, and what I mean, that low mood, because I don't have a good sleep with that. It's like it's unpleasant sleep and sometimes unpleasant dreams. So I try and make myself happy before going to bed. But a lot of the time I end up doing is drinking caffeine because that gives me the boost. But then, if I do that too much, I won't be able to sleep at all. And I've always struggled to even wake up. Even if I've slept for so much a long time, it's like it just seems like an effort at times just to get out of bed. There's been very few days where I've just wanted to jump up and be up and just doing what I want to do, even though there's nothing to dread or anything. It's just sometimes it's just that struggle of moving out of bed. Sometimes I think maybe dreams are just too good sometimes, or just that nice feeling of feeling comfortable and sleeping and resting. Because when I'm active, it feels like my mind is always on. It's always in full throttle, thinking about something.
Is this maybe why people get into relationships, because they want some inspiration when that you don't get when you're alone? Um, like, sometimes I just wish somebody would bring me my breakfast. But then I realise that I won't be content to consume that breakfast unless I'm up and washed. So I just have to get over that hurdle of the routine that is in place. Although recently I've been trying or experimenting with not doing the routine, putting off having a shower for a little while, and I crack after about an hour. The sequence doesn't seem correct, but yeah. And what if someone asked me to go out and I wasn't washed? All those things. But going to bed at night, I don't know. Yeah, I put in the text that a lot of it's child rearing. A lot of these things happen to you when you're a child. Your reactions to them are developed, and you can carry them into adulthood. Your response to all these things. So it's all about whether or not your childhood was kind of easy or traumatic to a certain extent regarding discipline, say, and rules.
Human beings are incredible. You can scoop out sections of their brain, and then their brain will adapt, and the plasticity of our our brains, our minds, our behaviours, everything can be modified, everything can be changed, as long as it's changed from within. Every difficulty and struggle here can be modified to some extent. What I hope is that rather than accepting and then leaving things as an acceptance that we are in some ways fixed, because that is almost like the medical model of being broken. We use these things to identify things that chime with us, things that do have a resonance with us, and then because we are autistic, use our flexibility to decide what needs changing, what needs overcoming, what routines are absolutely the right things for us because we've worked out, and what can be adapted to. Unfortunately, when we put these things out, as neurodivergent Lou has put them out here, it can encourage people to feel as though that's it then. That's who we are. That's our nature. And I'll fight for that nature. I'll fight for that version of me. And I feel that that's limiting. So there's wisdom in here, but we shouldn't just accept what we've been conditioned to, and we shouldn't accept, whether it's coming from the medical profession or whether it's coming from other autistic advocates, a version of reality. We should make it up individually for ourselves. That's the autistic way. Picking the bits that fit us and working with them with knowledge.
Number 10. Stimming. Why I assumed I didn't experience this trait. I assumed that because I didn't flap my hands, that I wasn't stimming. I didn't realise that stimming could be a variety of things. How this trait showed up. Repeating phrases over and over. Twirling hair around my fingers. Walking on tiptoes. Watching moving objects. Cracking knuckles. Number 11. Scripting. Why I assumed I didn't experience this trait. This means rehearsing or practicing conversations, sometimes to hide autistic differences. I assumed that this meant you had to write down or practice the script, so assumed I didn't experience it. How this trait showed up. I spent a lot of time looping pretend scripts around in my head, having conversations to practice responding. I watched how other people acted in real life and on TV and used phrases from these. And number 12. Need for routine. How I took this literally. I assumed that this meant you have to do exactly the same thing in a certain order. How this trait showed up. Needing to travel the same route each time. Struggling with the change in seasons. Wearing a thick coat in the middle of summer. Eating the same food over and over again until I suddenly hate it and never eat it again. Hating when the supermarket changes layout. Hating when food packaging changes. What's your thoughts?
I'm strictly in the routine camp, and I had to, when I had my diagnosis and thinking back to all the times that I adjusted to the world around me and masked, etc. And I rediscovered stimming, gently rocking backwards and forwards, and at the age of just over 50, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, the one thing I find actually quite interesting from the stimming one was cracking knuckles. Because that's something I do. I didn't realise it was stimming, I just thought it was a bad habit. I do recognise now what I do. I tend to stroke my beard. And if I shave, I stroke my chin instead. It's like that sort of comforting movement. And I can remember like tapping my feet a few times, and I remember doing that somewhere public, and someone was irritated by it and told me to stop because it was in a library. In fairness, so it was clearly here. But yeah, it's I do find a lot of these things interesting, and the routine thing, absolutely. Um, Anytime routine changes, like even something minor. And I do recall the times where I used to go to my convenience store quite regularly. I would very openly criticise any time they'd change the layout. And they'd usually change the layout to if they're selling something seasonal, Christmas of course, and Halloween stuff. It's like they'd move it temporarily, but I'd still have to have my moan just to get it out because I was just frustrated because I was going straight to that section where I went to all the time to get something. I must have looked like a rude Victor Meldrew. But letting that frustration out maybe was a stim as well.
I was looking at an illustration yesterday of a guy scratching his head in puzzlement, and it's called displacement theory. And it's like based on this idea of observing animals, like a bird will sit and peck at seeds or the ground when it's unsure if it's safe or it's under threat. So it has to do something to handle the anxiety, as it were, the displacement. It displaces the energy. And so I thought, do people actually scratch their head when they're a bit puzzled and confused about something? And I thought, is that stimming? And to reflect what Harry says about chin stroking, I do that to such a degree now that I've actually got dry skin developing on my chin.
I think the definitions are that stimming is self-soothing, doing something repetitively that is calming, that takes up your sensual space, that gives the brain a rhythm and an activity. My stimming as a child was rocking in a chair, and I destroyed chairs by sitting 4 hours, banging the back of my head and neck against the chair, and I don't need to do that now as an adult, but it's interesting to hear what GR says, because as we realise our autism in older times, the people who realise their autism later on sometimes find, looking at the kind of things that we do, that we stim, the chewing of our nails, the things that actually harm us, and then replacing them with something else rather than trying to suppress them, becoming more autistic, because there are things in our nature that are actually hardwired into us where stimming can give relief, but finding a way of doing it that isn't going to hurt us. It can get to where self-harm is a extension of stimming. People say that they want to feel something, though I'm not qualified to, that's just an association in my head. An interesting thing about Knuckles is that there was a doctor who decided that from teenage years, when he was told that if he continued to crack his knuckles he would get arthritis, he spent the next 40 or 50 years only cracking the knuckles on one hand, and then kept having them x-rayed and measured and could find no difference between the two hands.
I put in the text there about fluffy toys, and it's quite amusing. I was recently in a second-hand shop, and a box of children's fluffy toys caught my eye, and I got a bit obsessed with it. I started picking up this, smiley face, this yellow smiley face. Is it Mr. Men or something like that, with these little legs? And I thought, wouldn't mind taking him home. And then other ones began to grab my attention, and it took me back to the time when I had a dog in a second-hand shop, and she went over and brought a dog toy over to me, and that was her dog for the rest of her life. So I thought, the attachment to these little proxy figures, these representatives on Earth, yeah, it's beginning to intrigue me.
I just want to thank one of our listeners for their support there with those emojis. A light bulb, a strength arm, a thumbs up and some clapping. So something one or more of us have said has chimed with somebody out there in the world. That's lovely, Malice. Thank you.
Final post for today is from Sophie James. Personal blog, neurodivergent women and mentor navigating one experience at a time, sharing real stories, small wins, big feelings, and everything in between. Here to connect, validate, and remind you that you are not alone. And shared the following about perfectionism and neurodivergence. Perfectionism can be very overwhelming. The subject of this week's group sessions are perfectionism and fear of getting things wrong, which is something I experience a lot of the time. Right now I've been hyper focused on picking the perfect dress for a party I have coming up, and I must have looked at over 100 dresses now and still can't choose. I even went to Bluewater today and spent hours there and left with nothing. I ordered a dress a few days ago and it just didn't look right on me at all. And since then, it's like I've been completely obsessed but getting nowhere. Tomorrow, I'm going to try on some more, even if I didn't initially like them, just to put an end to the feeling that it has to be perfect and push myself past this decision paralysis. It shouldn't be this hard. Sometimes it feels things aren't a certain way, nothing will feel right and everything will go wrong. I think it's important we talk to others who feel this way to allow ourselves to navigate these feelings instead of getting caught up in an endless cycle of avoidance and anxiety. What's people's thoughts? The reason I shared this is because this perfectionism thing always comes into my head. And reading Sophie's experience about choosing a dress for a particular occasion, it resonates with me in a way where I want to choose something, it's in the more simpler terms of doing something or choosing something. Like the worst thing I think I've discovered is editing tool on, when I'm on my laptop. Because I spend time now editing some of the music I listen to because I don't like the someone saying before a song a 1, 2, 3, 4, or someone adding a bit of noise before a song starts. And even though I've done it quite effectively for me to kind of listen to, when I want to listen to it later on, I just felt it's become an obsession, and I must have done it, listened to about thousands and thousands of music just to do that particular thing. It's a bit different from what Sophie's expressed, but the perfectionism thing always strikes me.
I'm glad I don't take any real care in how I dress. And I can't remember the last time I didn't wear jeans. So it's jeans, trainers, t shirt, plaid shirt, pretty much how I've been dressing for 40 odd years. I dressed grunge before grunge was a thing.
Well, thanks everyone. That was a great discussion tonight, as always. And thanks to the people that have shared the post that we've discussed tonight. This is Harry's Facebook for Sunday the 9th of August 2026, which is part of the Spectrum Voices conversation, which is live every Sunday, 5:55 to 7 PM UK time. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.